Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby, and I did take a little break, not a really long one, but a couple weeks off from full episodes. So I just did a couple mini-sodes of me airing my thoughts and opinions. Yikes. And now I'm back with full episodes with wonderful guests because I like to feature fabulous women each week. And this week, I'm going to be talking with someone. We're going to be talking about disabilities and disability pride. It's actually July is Disability Pride Month. And if I'm missing that up, if it's Pride, Disability, or Disability Pride, I have a tendency anymore to reverse things. So I apologize. But I always also like to talk about a little bit about how I know my guests, because I just think connections are so important. It's so important that we are open when we're out. Whether it's at a function like a card mixer or even at a family event, you never know who you're going to meet that you might have something in common, or you might not realize it at first, but you save the person's business card and you think, oh, okay, I don't know if I'll need this, but then you might need to refer them to a friend, or you might be able to help one another out in the future. And that's why I always like to say how I know my guests, because a lot of times I know them personally, and other times I've been introduced to them through other wonderful people that I know. So Vicki is someone I've not actually met in person. This is the first time I'm talking with Vicki. I was actually introduced to Vicki through Gab Benesso, one of my serial guests who you've heard from. Oh gosh, Gab has been on at least 4 or 5 episodes, and she was introduced to me through NAMI, and I'm connected to Marie Onakevich at NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. And because of that, Gab has been brought into my life, and I love talking to Gab. Gab was here in Scranton in May to do some wonderful events to help promote humor and healing, the power of healing, humor and laughter to help people with their wellness and mental health and all kinds of great things in her message that she was here specifically for herself, talking about bipolar disorder. So thanks to Gab. Gab said, I think you need to talk to Vicki Landers. So I'm so excited to have Vicki Landers here, who is with, is it Disability Pride Pennsylvania? Is that right, Vicki?
Yes,
And you are the executive director. Is that correct?
correct.
And I believe founder. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
So tell us a little bit about, I did look at your website, so I got a sense of what it is that your organization is about, what you try to accomplish, and you're very active. But in your words, if you wouldn't mind sharing, just telling me a little bit about the organization and how or why you wanted to get involved with it, or get found it.
Okay, sure. Um, Disability Pride, uh, Pennsylvania is all about celebrating the disability experience through fun, programming, community connections, just social interaction. Um, I actually became involved with a local event here in Philadelphia, which is where I'm from, Disability Pride Philadelphia, in its first year that it started, as just a participant. Had no idea what it was going to be. And the following year, I got involved in some volunteering, doing some artwork, and things like that. Then I became friends with the person who was kind of producing it by himself with a little group of folks, and ended up co-producing it with him for years. And he stepped off to do some work around disability equality and education. And I decided that at that point in time that we needed to be a nonprofit, and that we could do more as a nonprofit, and do it statewide. And so, I mean, my goal is to make Pennsylvania disability proud. So that's kind of the work that we do every day, and the thoughts around most of the things that I work on.
Well, and I have a lot of different questions for you. And so I don't know where I want to get started, but let me start with, I guess, how do you think we're doing so far in Pennsylvania in your experience as far as equity, equality, inclusion?
We've made steps forward, but there's still a ton of work that needs to get done. Yeah.
And obviously I would say that's, well, let's face it, we're all a work in progress, but in some
Mhm.
areas much more than others. What are some of the biggest issues that you feel need to really be tackled or really addressed sooner rather than later?
Um, well, housing, accessible, affordable, integrated housing. And the reason why I use all three of those is obviously we need the housing to be accessible so that all disabled folks can participate, and have somewhere where they can live and just enjoy themselves. Um, affordable because a lot of housing is going up that is not affordable even for, you know, the normal Joe or Jane. Um, and then integrated is for years and years, disabled people have been siloed into facilities and different types of housing that is very, very one-sided. It's kind of it's like the seniors. They start putting seniors into like senior centers, senior housing, even the like 55 and older housing, like you're kind of like putting folks into those spaces. And that is not what that's not what society looks like, and it's not what integration looks like. And I'm completely about integrating us so that if you make housing affordable and accessible, then anybody can live there, no matter what it looks like to them.
Yeah. And you make a great point because it's not like we need to have, segregated communities, right? Like, oh, all the older folks live over here and all,
Yeah.
like
And that's
it's probably not the healthiest, really, right?
right. It also, we're doing more and more of it, because a lot of the housing that's going up is so high end that it's catered to a certain, you know, piece of society, and then there's the aging housing. And then, it's even to me, the PHA housing or the housing authorities and things like that are segregating out housing to different folks. And I just feel that this, at least especially for disabled folks who have been um segregated out um at so many times, and how easy it is to just we want to be included. We are a natural part of society. We've been here since the beginning. And we just want to, there's no reason why it should just be a building or an apartment complex or whatever of just disabled people. We could live next door to you as long as it was accessible. Yeah, I just find that, I don't know if you know the term universal design.
No.
The universal design says if you design it, if you design something for every person, you know, then anybody can live in it. And to me, I mean, that just totally makes sense to me. If I'm doing a building that has, you know, all of this housing in it, why wouldn't I build it so that anybody could live in it? Folks who are not disabled, who don't need the accessible features, actually find some of them very helpful and don't even realize it. And then the other folks don't even realize that it's an accessibility feature. So if you build an apartment with universal design put into it, then anybody can move into it. And that
That
way
makes
your housing, like
Yeah.
your housing options just completely open the door.
That makes sense. I'm guessing I'm getting, well, I'm going to be 52 in a few weeks, well,
Mhm.
in September, and I'm getting crankier as I get older and more cynical. But I tend to feel like anymore, I keep coming back to, is it always about money? So I'm guessing, is it possible that that just the bottom line is what I see as far as why things happen, as opposed to thinking about, the good of society, the good, because to me, that sounds perfect. Universal
Mhm.
design, it makes perfect sense. But I'm guessing maybe it comes down to money at some point.
Well, it's money in the sense of how much they can get if they do it for certain folks,
Mm,
not in the sense of it costs more money to make it universally designed.
I gotcha.
That's,
Yeah.
I always want people to understand that there's a huge difference, you know, and I always tell builders, developers that your really high end building is really great, but folks can't age in, and stay into these places. And the next new thing is going to come out, and then who's going to live in these places that are not accessible for the folks who need them?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Absolutely. So let me ask you too, before we get too far into the conversation, what
Mhm.
I, I know it's hard. We don't as a society agree on much anymore. We agree on less and less, it seems, unfortunately. But what is how do you define a disability? Because I know recently when Gab was here and she talked about her bipolar, and she was at the Scranton Counseling Center, and a lot of people, or I should say a few people, brought up this idea of invisible disabilities. So, and it's, and I know that when you speak for people with a disability, you're speaking for, like everyone, not just a
Mhm.
certain disability. But how do you define it, and how do you talk to people about that?
So I mean, disability is so it is there. It's just there's so many, disabilities out there, and they're so unique to the person that has it, you know, and there are, of course, those that are very, seen, and then we have ones that are, I now call, instead of invisible, I call them unseen, because I feel like invisible almost makes people think that like they don't exist.
Yeah. Like they're making it
So,
up somehow or something. Yeah. Mhm.
yes. So I've started to use the terminology unseen disabilities, because that they are there, you just may not see them. And I feel like that, as a person who has multiple unseen disabilities, um, it feels better. I have a better conversation with folks about it. Um, but to me, it's a disability, because it's so diverse. I mean, somebody with diabetes in the ADA, FDA, I hate initials. Um, they it's categorized like diabetes, is categorized as, you have a disability. Most people don't think about that,
Mm,
you know. And then it gets as severe as folks who have severe and complex disabilities, you know. They're both just as important, you know. So I just find that there's so many things out there, and we're still learning about new ones. Um, that disability really is anything to me that makes, it doesn't limit me, it doesn't limit the person. It's just something that is different in your body, you know.
yeah.
That and really, it's it's so unique to each person. Like, just because Gab and I both have bipolar disorder, and we're very different people, and bipolar affects us in a very different way. Just and that's why I try to explain to people. I'm like, it's very personal to the person, and like their body makeup, the life that they've lived, the way that they move, all of those things.
Yeah. And I had first heard, I appreciate that you said unseen as opposed to invisible. And I know I've seen that term and I heard it when Gab was talking to someone at the Scranton Counseling Center, someone who he talked about his struggles going to school. He was dyslexic. And he said that was something that, they just didn't have back in the day, the right education for him. And it was like, oh, you'll never succeed in college. And then he proved them wrong. But those kind of disabilities where you look at a person and you don't know that someone's, experiencing severe depression or dyslexia or necessarily maybe even autism or something
Mhm.
that you just don't see. And for the longest time, I think we've probably only thought of, oh, this person's in a wheelchair. That's disability. And we need to open up our minds to understanding that it's much more than that. And why do you think it is so important? Is it so that we can just, well, treat one another with more respect? Or what is the real reason for us to understand these disabilities?
Well, I just think that the more that you understand, the more that you see that disability is, again, it's just a part of who you are. It's not something that makes you less than or different. It's just another piece. Like, to me, I'm a big piece of my pie of all of the things that make me up. I just find that the that people need to know that it's there, and it's about changing the perception of what has been told to people about what disability is. And I think that if you can change the perception of what disability is, and not that it's not being able to do something or less than something, um, that it makes us all much better people, first of all, a lot more understanding, I think. Um, and I think it makes the world goes round in a better space. You're thinking about, you start thinking about everybody and how your work affects everybody, and just even, you know, um, uh, just say housing, like, I want people to stop building steps in front of houses.
Yeah.
you know, it absolutely, it's pretty, you know, but there are a lot of different things that you can do. And it doesn't have to be, if you built a ramp, basically, or graded, forget what it's called. Something new that we've been talking about is this kind of gradual lift, this, so you get to the top, but it's kind of gradual, and it is like, but it doesn't look like a standard, what you think of as a ramp. Um, but I tell people, I'm like, if you built a ramp, everybody will use it. But if you build stairs, there's a huge portion of people who can't use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a ramp is actually easier to fix and repair than stairs.
Hmm. Well, that's a good point. Yeah. So let me ask you then, as people are trying to understand and to do better. So that's a great example of, so we talk about the seen disability, someone in a wheelchair, or maybe even someone with a walker or cane that can't do steps well. So what's something that when we have these conversations so people can understand and keep other people in mind and consideration, what's an example, do you think, of something that people can do better about for the unseen? For example, is it maybe even in education with children with autism? Or how can we be better at being inclusive with people who have those disabilities that we don't know they have?
Mhm. Well, I think it's, to me, it's kind of educating yourself on the things that are out there. And also, just to comment, for me, it makes just sense that you would want to know who it is that you're speaking to, or going to work with, like getting to know that person, and knowing, like, sometimes that person works differently than you. I mean, most people work differently than everybody else. I mean, that's kind of what is great about being a human being, is that we all do things our way, you know. But it's just kind of, you build a better society when you're doing it. So it's just being mindful that not everybody has this is the same as yourself. So it opening your mind up that there are different things that can happen. There are different folks who deal with things differently. Um, there are other ways of doing things, you know. I tell people all the time, I'm like, not everybody puts their pants on the same way. You know, there's basics to it, you know, but it's still all done differently. You know.
So we can't use that. Everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time, right?
No, because it's not like there are so many other ways of doing it that people don't, you know, it's just opening your mind to thinking that there are other folks out there. There are folks that aren't doing the way that you do it, the way that even the societal norms say that they are. And I'm always about breaking what those are, you know,
Yeah.
because I think that's where we've gotten. This is how long all of this has been. I mean, disabled people have been subjected to terrible, horrible things since the beginning of time, you know. And it's going to take a long time for us to break that habit, you know, and to start to just be kinder people.
Yeah.
That's why I always tell people, I'm like, just be kinder. Like, it's not that hard.
That would help a lot, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are education pieces out there. There are folks who will talk about it. I, you know, not at every moment in time, but I would much rather you ask. Like, you shouldn't be afraid to ask. You just have to remember that not everybody is going to be in a place where they want to talk about it, and they shouldn't have to, you know. I
But give
mean,
them the opportunity, right?
right. And just be open and, you know, and ask.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the whole thing, is people are afraid, and then it becomes more stigmatizing, because what you're trying to not where you're trying not to offend somebody or to do something, you actually do more damage than you would if you just said, hey, what do you need? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great, I was thinking of that before I hit the record button, that I wanted to even ask you about. It's like, we live in, I think, very interesting times, and it's very challenging. I think we we want to make things as simple as this side and that side, but it's not. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it's never, because life is lived in the gray and in the in between. But we want to make it that it's that simple, and it's not. So we worry, oh well, will this offend somebody, or would that word offend somebody, or that. But I appreciate what you just said, and I think that's what we're missing. That piece is missing: communication. Ask. You don't have
yes.
to ask rudely. You don't have to shout. You don't have to accuse. You don't have to name call, but you can ask with a genuine concern, with a genuine curiosity. I'd like to understand better, or how can I help? And I think that would probably really help things quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm convinced that if we just, I mean, everything works better when you communicate. That's what I my therapist tells me that all the time. So but it's true. I mean, in almost every aspect of what communication looks like to different people, because it doesn't always look the same, you know. And as disabled people, we all know that. But it's just like, it's common courtesy, you know. It's also, you know, how do you want to be treated, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, or how would you want them to treat your grandmother? How that's my thing, is like, would you treat your grandmother like that?
Yeah, absolutely not. Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. And for most people, you know, there are always circumstances, but it's always my kind of my go-to. But yeah, I mean, opening up the lines of communication with folks, being open to the conversations that are being had, you know, not saying, well, that's not the way it is, or that's not right. You know, just kind of opening your mind up that there are other possibilities, and that folks not in realizing that not everybody, we're not supposed to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's what makes us different than most other things on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. We are definitely unique, each of us. Yeah. So with the organization, you're offering a lot of the things that are needed. You're offering programming, you're offering education, right? Information for people to learn. And now advocacy too, right? You're
Yes.
advocating for people with disabilities. You also have a lot of great events. In fact, that's how I know Gab connected us, because she's been involved in many of your events, and you have some coming up. I believe you said July 22nd in Lehigh Valley. Could you tell us a little bit about those? Because I do have listeners in that area who may want to check out what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. So we are hosting with LAVACA, who is the Lehigh Valley Arts and Culture Council Association. Hopefully I got that right. Um, the very first Disability Pride Lehigh Valley event. Disability Pride events happen in so many different ways, and they look different in every area and in every situation. We have kind of a game plan that we've used from all that I've learned over the years for our Philadelphia events, which we're on our 11th year. And I kind of want to come to your area, sit at the table, be like, hey, what do you want it to look like? And be able to guide and help to create what it'll look like. So in the Lehigh Valley this year, we are having an event from 11 to 3. It is going to be at the Penn State Lehigh Valley campus. It is a free event. It is open to the public. Everybody is invited to come and join us. This isn't a disability person event. It is open. It is for everybody. And the reason why that happens is because we think of access first, and to make sure that that anybody can join our event. And that makes for an event that everybody can come to. So we want everybody to come. And it's a day of celebrating the disability experience. You may not be a person with a disability, but you can still experience the joy and the pride that disabled people have. You learn a little, see what it actually looks like to be part of an inclusive event. Because a lot of people say they have inclusive events, but they're not. But it's a day where we have a stage that's filled with disabled performers, some local and some of my friends Gooch and the Motion, who are kind of there are headliners, and then local groups in the area. We'll have vendors, information tables, which I think is very important to have, because people don't know of all the information out there. You know, it's not like there's a phone book or a website that you can go to find out what you need. So having different types of resources out there, find out what you could use, what's going on. We have accessible games. We put together, we find and sometimes doctor, if we have to, games so that way anybody could play them. We'll have food trucks out. We have an art show that's going on during the event.
Nice.
So it's just, it's a day of just coming out and celebrating the disability experience, the trials, tribulations, the accomplishments, and just kind of the feeling that people with disabilities have.
And that's the 22nd Penn State Lehigh Valley campus. And did you say 10 or 11 to 3?
11 to 3.
11 to 3. And it is free and is open to everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
You can't, if we wouldn't be doing justice and doing the work that I do, if it was an event just for disabled people, because then we would be doing what most other events do to us and not make them accessible, so we can't join them. So we we want to show people what true inclusion looks like, and that's just by thinking about access first.
Yeah, that's great. And so you've done them. I know you've done them Philadelphia, I believe, the Harrisburg region
Mhm.
as well, and Pittsburgh also.
Yes. Hmm.
So you've hit most of the state. Now we just need to get you up here. I'm in Scranton, northeastern Pennsylvania. We have to get you up here.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple people from the Scranton area who are looking, who would love to have that. So I'm always willing to have conversations with folks. The only thing that I ask folks is to come together with a group of disabled folks, their allies, folks that are interested in putting this together, because it should be disabled led. And let's figure out what it could look like, because our events in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and Lehigh Valley, all four of them look very different. There's some main themes, but they all look different because everybody from all four of those areas, all four of those communities look very different. So we wanted to, I want to come up and I want to, like in Scranton, it's like, what does Disability Pride Scranton look like? What do you want it to look like? Like, I want to meet people and figure out what it could look like to you. It could be a movie event. I mean, it could be a picnic. There's just, it's so, like, an event can be just about anything you want, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it can start with no money, and, and it can be exactly what you want it to be. What we ask is that it is inclusive, so it's made with access, and that it is community driven.
Yeah. That sounds great. And honestly, I don't think we do have much in that area going on. I haven't seen events like that. So we could definitely use that here. And I like what you said, that it can be anything and it doesn't have to be like a large budget or whatever. Although I'm sure, I think as I've noticed with a lot of your events, it is helpful to have like a corporate sponsor or something to help with costs if if you do get
Mhm.
into certain expenses.
Right. And we have, I have amazing corporate partners that I work with, that fund us, not for an event, but for, what we want to do for the year. So we're able to allocate money to helping, communities build on what that could look like. So I just think that, money shouldn't be the issue why you don't do something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, we started Disability Pride Philadelphia here in the city with, I think it was a $2,000 budget. And
Wow.
now it's grown into a $40,000 budget. But we now are on our 11th year, so it it just could look. I just don't want people to think that that's like it has to be this big festival. That's
Hmm.
not what it has to look like. It could look very different, and Disability Pride events should look the way that you want them to.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I know myself, I've done many events. I do stand up comedy and I do laughter yoga. And I used to do fundraisers for the humor therapy fund that I developed here in Scranton. And I mean, we're talking just making a couple $100s for several years just through basket raffles and,
Hmm.
me doing laughter yoga and comedians coming out and donating their time. So, I mean, not that that should always happen because I believe in paying people, especially in the arts, who are always underpaid or not paid. But when you have people who are willing to volunteer their time or donate or have their services, you can do any number of things, I mean,
Hmm.
parks, any be in a park and do, like you said, a picnic, anything. So that, like, I love that comment that you said about like, don't let money, stop you. Cause a lot of times you're not going to have that to start off, and that's okay. Don't let that limit you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is also why partnering with us or bringing us in to run an event that you want to do. You may not have, if you're not in a place where, or event planning is not in your wheelhouse, I mean, we can come and, basically take on most of the work. I still want a community to work around, so that it looks the way that you would like it to look. But, you know, I'm a firm believer that people should be paid for their work. So artists get paid for their work. But this is also why I have corporate partners.
Yes. Yeah. And that's great. Yeah. Yeah. For too long, believe me, I know as someone who does comedy and have good friends who are painters, it's been the oldest tale of one of the oldest tales of time. Just come here and donate your services. And I remember for me with my business for the longest time, it was about quote unquote exposure. And I'm like, no, I'm like Karen and Silkwood. I've been exposed. Please. I'm good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, no, thanks.
I have the same thing, where, they're like, oh, we would love for you to come and do this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm a nonprofit. Doesn't mean that I don't want to we don't want money. Doesn't mean that we don't need money to run and to be able to do the things we want to do. If, but we do have passion projects, and, we're willing to have conversations, but everybody needs to, everybody should get paid for their time and whatever it is that they do. Again, it might look different for everybody, but unfortunately money is something that every person every person has to have.
Yeah.
Basically, it's one of those things that you have to have money. It's terrible. I mean, basic necessities shouldn't come out of pocket, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. That's a topic for another time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no, and that is the truth though. You're right. I mean, everybody's time is valuable. But like you said, there are passion projects. Like for me, this podcast is something I care about, and I care about promoting women and what they have to say and their experiences and informing people, helping people to learn, be enlightened, be inspired so that their passion can be lit, but yeah, that's wonderful to be able to share talents. But yeah, you're right. They should absolutely be paid. Well, as we get ready to wrap up here, I would like, is there anything else that you think is just really important? I want to remind people in the Lehigh Valley area to check out that event, and I will post that in the show notes because it sounds like a wonderful event for people to check out. Is there anything else that in closing that you would want to share, or that you just think is really important to know, whether it's about your organization, yourself, or disability in general?
So I guess with it being Disability Pride Month, I want people to remember Disability Pride Month celebrates, the disability experience, and the reason why it's in July is because it is around the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was the first piece of legislation that gave disabled people rights, to be and accommodations to be able to do the things that they wanted to do. But I also want to stress that disability pride is something that should be celebrated every day, and not just, I'm always afraid that that by saying it's Disability Pride Month, that people are gonna be like, okay, we have to think about disabled people this month and then never again. So we at Disability Pride celebrate Disability Pride every day, any day, and that we are celebrating ourselves in whatever that looks like, just like everybody else does. And one piece of advice for everybody is that pride is your own feeling, and it's not grouped together with a certain community or organization. It is actually a feeling that everybody should possess.
Yeah. And that's a great point. We're talking about disability pride, but that goes, I think, a lot of times for all these observances, right? We tend to, okay, February is Black History Month, June is Pride Month, and, March is Women's History Month. And I mean, right. And now, and then to be honest and fair, I think not every single person is going to be passionate about every single, I mean, we should always be kind and loving to every person regardless, but we're not going to be passionate about everything. Like for me, wanting to promote women on my podcast. So I believe, hey, forget just March. I like to promote women all the time because, hey, I think men have had a good run of it for a really long time. So that's
Absolutely.
me. And that's
Hmm.
me. That's what I choose to do. But you're right. We can't just say, oh, it's July. Let's just focus on people with disabilities. And then
Right.
it's like, okay, that month is over. You're right. It's important that we remember to, and I think, what would you say is the best way, to honor that? Is it in learning, like we said earlier, having open conversations, taking the time to understand better, to get more informed?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's asking the questions, finding, learning about it. It's also like I just told somebody, I was like, ways that you can celebrate disability pride, not being a disabled person, is to volunteer, advocate, or fund or support, or disability organizations or individuals. You know, it doesn't, you don't have to be disabled to celebrate disability pride.
Yeah. And that's a great point. That's a great point that, you can help support and be an advocate and an ally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and keep it in mind all the time. I mean, like we said earlier with the conversation about housing, I mean, these are things that, however we're each involved in the community, that should be kind of in our minds. Like, how can we make sure that this is accessible for everybody?
Yeah. I mean, there, housing is a basic right, or should be. And that, that's something that most people don't even think about. But the fact that like housing, transportation, is also like, can we make transportation accessible so that everybody can use it? You have public transportation, but it's not actually accessible.
Yeah.
So is it really public transportation?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we do have a lot of areas to improve upon, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just like taking that step in, asking somebody with a having a conversation with one person, about their disability, you know,
Yeah.
without what I don't want people to do is to, which I found last year was there was an organization that decided that the disabled person that they at their organization, they were going to have a conversation about themselves and their disability. Like that was what they were going to do. And I was like, you don't really like, unless that person was very into it, like you can't just, you have to remember that not everybody is comfortable talking about it. Not everybody has to. Like, it's not our job to educate others, even though most of us do that on a very regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a great point. It's like, be curious, want to learn, but don't, pull someone aside and just be like, all right, so make me understand this. Like the person
Yes.
may be open like you've been today, and other people might, or it could be an off day. They could say, you know what, I'm not really in a place where I can talk to about that right now, but
Right.
feel free to read a book, feel free to read, an article here
Hmm.
online. There are other ways that a person can get informed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it just, I just think that this is these, and us having this conversation and it being open and like that, the more of these conversations that people, um, just open their mind to have the conversations. I think it goes a long way.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, communication. Your therapist is right. I'd say that all the time. My degree's in journalism, and I just feel that so much anymore, the problems, a lot of that we have are from miscommunications or lack of communication or misinformation, which is, we won't even talk about that because
Yeah.
that could be a whole topic on the internet. It's just like people just need to slow down, take a second and go, is this even viable? This source does
Hmm.
this look accurate at all? And maybe I can do a little research on my own just to make sure before I start spreading it, because we do
Hmm.
need the correct information, right?
Yes. I mean, you should have an opinion, but you should make an informed opinion. And one article does not give you an opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should
Yeah.
not
You're
make up
right.
your opinion on something. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's great to have opinions. You're entitled to have them, but it's always
mhm,
good to have the facts on which you're
mhm,
building that opinion, right? Yeah.
right. And
And if you
make
can
your
have
own decision.
experiences, lived experiences where you've actually encountered and talked to people, that's even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So is there anything? I'm going to promote in the show
Mhm.
notes. I'll make sure I promote once again the July 22nd event in Lehigh Valley. Anything else that's coming up for your organization that you'd want to give a shout out to? I will also mention in the show notes, I will put a link to your website because people can donate. People can learn more about what you've been up to, what you've got coming up. Besides the event in Lehigh Valley, anything big that you'd want to just give a shout out to or a plug before we go?
Sure. So we have events coming up. August 26th is our event in Pittsburgh. September is our rescheduled Philadelphia event. Harrisburg is October 7th, and most of that you can find. And then the other thing we're doing this summer is exploring nature through a grant that we got through the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. Just kind of learning what accessible trails look like and what you can do out in nature.
That's awesome. I love that because nature for me is my medicine. Honestly, it's I always say nature therapy. I going out for a trail run, walk, getting on a kayak. It just soothes my soul, honestly. But
Mhm.
to be honest, I haven't taken the time to think about like, wow, how important that is. Accessible trails. What does that look like? A lot of trails are narrow, very narrow, have a lot of rocks and roots, raised roots that are, they're dangerous for people who
Mhm.
are actually have the ability to walk and run on them. So that's a wonderful grant. Excuse me. I'm so glad you got that. That's wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a fun experience because I wanted to bring something different to the trail. Not just is the trail accessible for us to use, but there's other things that you can do on the trail besides just walk it, run it, you know. That what are the fun things that you can do on the trails? We're doing a we're doing a scavenger hunt, selfie scavenger hunt. We're doing a walk and learn. We have a playing music. Everybody's bringing their instruments and drums, and we're gonna just jam on the trail. Like there's so many things you can do besides just use them like everybody else does.
Yeah. 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 Oh, absolutely. And I'm a big believer in forest bathing, that whole idea that nature suits us. So, I mean, like, doing all those things you mentioned and maybe even guided tours, so to speak, to learn about the foliage, to learn about animals, to learn about all that stuff. That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great.
that's our nature trail is basically walking with a historian who knows the area that we're going to be walking and telling us why it's important. It's part of the larger history of of the immigration movement.
Hmm. I know that's
So
something that people might not even consider when they're out in nature, right? The history behind
yeah.
it. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Vicki, for your time and for sharing. And any closing words as far as just from you personally, how it's been for you being involved in this? Because obviously you're impacting not just so many other lives of people with disabilities and without through education, but yourself. I'm sure that must impact you as well.
Yeah, so you know, I always tell everybody I got into what I'm doing because I wanted there to be places where me and all of my friends could have fun together. And that really is where I truly, you know, I found my passion, which is doing this work. Yes, it's my life, but when your passion is your life and the work that you can do is fun, like I just don't see anything else that, that why would you want to do anything else, and not everybody finds that in their life. I was very happy to, um, along with, all of the things that make up all my disability, um, I just, you know, I honestly, this journey has also led me into such, I call inclusionary practices to start looking at who besides disability am I not looking at and making how that opens up that space. So
Wow.
I just think everybody becomes better people and I want everybody to be better people.
Yeah, it's a good goal. Like you said earlier, being kind and everything else. And the more we have conversations like this one, the more that we are open to hearing things that are different from our opinion or just learning
Yeah.
things, I think the better that we can be.
Yeah. I mean, I tell everybody, I'm like, I'm queer and disabled, and I'm just enjoying me in my life, and that's all I have to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you again so much for this conversation. And again, to my listeners, check out the show notes, and in the promotions, I will make sure that I share the link to the it's Pride Disability PA, right? That's correct.
Disability Pride
Disability.
PA.
You know what? I keep doing that. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Disability Pride PA. Check
Hmm.
out the website. You can make a donation, you can learn, and you can check out the events because I know I have people listening from various places in Pennsylvania and beyond. So check out Lehigh Valley, July 22nd, and all the events coming up in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and everything that they've got going on. Information that I'm sure you can find useful, and you might want to even share with someone that you think could use the information. And like I said, you can even donate, which would be appreciated too, of course. So thank you again, Vicki, for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation, and continued success, and just the great work that you're doing, and helping us all be a little bit better, I think.
Thank you for inviting me. This is great. And I love the work that you're doing, and I love that you're amplifying women's voices. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much. And
mhm.
to my listeners, be sure to check us out next week. Come on back. I'm excited about the coming guests that we have. I'll be having people will be talking about September is a suicide awareness month, which is so important. I'll be having Nina, a woman named Nina Judge, who started a foundation in honor of her father who committed suicide. We'll be talking, we'll be throwing in some lighter topics too, but life is full of the light and the heavy, the light, everything in between. And we like to talk about all of it. So as I always say, I do appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.